press play. He's the voice of the intersection of marketing, tech, and popular culture. Thinking is his commodity. DJ, data punk, stylish sock collector, and author of the book Disruptive Marketing. Jeffrey Colon is your host of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds.
Friday, it's another episode of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds. I'm your host, Jeffrey Colon, broadcasting live from the Emerald City of Seattle. In this week's episode, we're going to ask the question if creatives make the best leaders. This is based off an article that Susan Cain wrote recently on LinkedIn. And also, is marketing in need of its own chief marketing officers? We'll talk a little bit about that and a recent piece that Jeff Jones, the CMO of Target, wrote for Advertising Age. All that and more on episode 40. Yes, we've reached middle age here at Disruptive FM. We hope you've enjoyed the last 40 episodes over the past 3 years. Of course, remember, 40 is the new 20. You can follow us on Twitter at Disruptive FM, and of course, in our Read, Write, Remix culture, we want you to be part of the conversation. Use hashtag DisruptiveFM for your contribution and voice in the show. I don't like to think of myself as just the voice in the show, but everyone, all the listeners, all the contributors, everyone else, as also the voice in the show. So this past week, Susan Cain, author of the book Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, and you should definitely read this book, especially if you are a manager or a leader at any company or a self-proprietor or someone who is creative in this world, who's probably someone who's listening to this show. In this piece that she had written for LinkedIn, she had noted how everyone, especially in the current day and age, and that day and age being 2016 right now, really wants to work for or invest in the world's most creative companies. This is one of the reasons why you have so many creative directors from the advertising world that used to work for agencies like RGA or JWT or Ogilvy or Saatchi & Saatchi or BBDO, are all gravitating toward companies like Google and Facebook and Microsoft and Twitter. The reason why people want to work for creative companies is because it gives them autonomy. And autonomy, I think, is the main currency in our day and age. We talk a lot about how attention and time is the new money, but I think autonomy is the new currency. And what I mean by that is the ability for people to actually innovate and take their creative ideas into execution mode. It's very hard to do at some companies when you're at the whim of others. Yet, what Susan had noted in this piece is a study that was conducted by the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, which suggests that people who show true creativity, those whose ideas are not only useful but original, are rarely seen as leaders. In the study, researchers asked employees at a multinational company in India to rate their colleagues' creativity and leadership potential. They asked U.S. college kids to do the same with their classmates, and in both cases, the most creative people were not perceived as leaders. I wonder if this is because creative types have also always been more introverted. Now, I don't subscribe to the theory that you're 100% introverted or you're 100% extroverted. It's the same flawed logic when people say, hey, I'm 100% analytical or I'm 100% creative. I think there's a mixture of both that we have based on our personality, our upbringing, our surroundings, and what we do for a living. Because obviously the things that we do for a living were influenced by what we see around us. So I don't subscribe to the fact that you're either an introvert or you're an extrovert. I think you can be a combo of both. I personally think that I'm what I would say an extrovert / introvert. That means I enjoy speaking with others. I enjoy talking with others. I enjoy amplifying my ideas. But at the same time, I like to be in settings where I observe, where I don't have to say anything, where I just listen and I take in the world around me. I think when I come home from a day when I'm working, I'm a total 100% introvert because I'm 100% of an extrovert when I'm around people, and that can tire you out. I think the same thing can be said if you're an introvert, where you are what David Zweig, who wrote the book Invisibles, people who are very detailed or have detailed jobs. You have to be introverted in some respects because you have to actually do things that require you to be around silence or solace. So you might be an editor. You can't be in a loud, noisy place when you're editing. You have to work around sort of this quiet vibe, so to speak. Maybe you're a designer. I think you want to be more introverted in those situations. But I think when you're not in that situation, let's say you go to a group meeting to present your ideas, you can be extroverted. So again, I don't think there is this one size fits all. So I think what Cain was getting at in this piece, and I really love it and I really recommend everyone reads it, is that people who like to spend time alone are decidedly at odds with today's team-based organizational culture. And what we have to also ask ourselves is if that team-based organizational culture is the best way to run business in the 21st century. Now, don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying that we should go back to an era where everybody is a shut-in and sits behind closed doors and doesn't talk to anybody. That era is long past, especially with all the technology that's around us. But I think we have to get back to a place where people are given the freedom to dream up and implement new ideas. And you're not going to be able to do that when you are in brainstorm sessions or group meetings, because we know what happens in those situations. It rarely leads to the most innovative or creative ideas. I think the best ideas really come when you're not forced to think about them, when you are actually not at work. Let's say you might be on holiday and you see something and it inspires you and allows you to actually apply that to your work. This is one of the reasons why you do need what I think are digital detoxes or divides from what you do all the time at work and then what you do like to do sort of within leisure time. I think the one can influence the other. So I think it's interesting that we haven't really accepted this as important in our culture. We've really moved toward a culture where we've literally broken down the walls. We have people that work on these open floor plans. There's not a lot of places to sort of go and experiment and think of new ideas, which is very, very important. I think all of the interesting ideas come from experimental doodling, or what I like to call being enthusiastically inefficient. And I think one of the other things that's really hurt business culture, and specifically marketing, we see this a lot, is this yearning to strive for efficiency. Well, yes, efficiency helps you run a tight ship, but it doesn't help you create the next big thing. Another article that I found really interesting this past week was from Jeff Jones in Advertising Age. He wrote a piece called "Every Young Person Has the Potential to Be the Next CMO." What I thought was really interesting in this article, and I definitely agree with Jeff on this piece, is that we need a chief marketing officer for marketing. And I think the interesting thing that I talk about in my upcoming book, Disruptive Marketing, What Growth Hackers, Data Punks, and Other Hybrid Thinkers Can Teach Us About Navigating the New Normal, which drops in August, is I really note that marketing has pivoted and really changed. And that's actually a good thing because it is a very fascinating field to work in now. It is very analytical, but it is also very, very creative because you are trying to reach people at the end of the day. I think the other thing that the reason why we need a CMO of marketing is because marketing is actually the voice of a customer. So granted, you could work for a company that says, we understand the voice of the customer, but they're not necessarily going to take what that voice is and put it into their products. That's rarely going to happen in an engineering-driven culture. Yet I think marketers can understand because they have empathy and understand what people are trying to do. They're more likely to go to an engineering or a development team and say, hey, look, why do you have the user experience this way? We have heard timeless amounts from our customer base that they don't like how this functions. And we have to make sure that we're being considerate of their feelings with how they use our products and services. I think the other thing that's also interesting is anything that you want to imagine marketing, I think, can be now. And what I mean by that is we didn't have a world a couple of years ago where you had someone who was a social media manager. Let's say 10 years ago, it was rare that you could find any of those positions. Now they're everywhere. It was rare 20 years ago to have a web manager. No one really put emphasis into websites like they do now. It was rare to have people in fields like user experience, or mobile marketing, or virtual reality marketing, or the Internet of Things marketing. So we have to again think about the fact that technology now is the biggest indicator of how marketing is going to be used. And marketing should really be looked at less as an amplification model and really more as a sentiment model. And I think this is what Jeff was getting to in this piece, is how are you really feeling what people are doing out there based on their behavior? And how do you pull that into your organization so that you are really becoming a marketing first organization? And I can't remember who said this quote. It'll come to me later. And if you do know it, make sure you tweet it to me. But I think it went something like this. The only two things that matter in business are marketing and innovation. Hopefully you enjoyed this week's episode. It's a short one. We like to keep them that way, though. If you have topics for us, tweet to us at DisruptiveFM on Twitter or use the hashtag DisruptiveFM. We do have some guests that are coming up on the show. Some had to cancel, but we'll make sure that we get them here and we'll be talking to them again and doing some wonderful interviews. Also, we'll have some interesting topics that we'll talk about in the next couple of episodes. Technology will soon erase millions of jobs. Could that be a good thing? How should we look at the end of work and how that applies to marketing? That's always an interesting discussion, because if people don't have jobs and they don't have income, then do you need to market anything to them? Interesting conversation I'd like to delve into. So we'll get into that, and we'll also talk a little bit more about, is the world of apps over? Meaning, should marketers be putting more emphasis into the new world, which is one of bots and one of artificial intelligence? We'll get into a couple of those topics. And then, of course, some good old-fashioned marketing conversation. Is there still a place for street art as marketing? So we always talk about the digital world, but are we ignoring the physical world as marketers? I think that is to our disadvantage, and we'll definitely devote a topic to how we can think about the physical world as marketers once again when it comes to experiences and events. And yes, that wonderful thing known as street art. All that and more on the next couple of episodes of Disruptive FM. I'm Jeffrey Colon, your host. We release a new episode every Friday from the city of Seattle. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. Rate us, review us, and subscribe to us. We'll catch you next time.
You've been listening to an episode of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds. Remember to subscribe to the show on iTunes. Purchase a copy of Jeffrey's latest book, Disruptive Marketing, on Kindle, hardcover and audio. Signing off from the city of Seattle. Press pause.
If you're a listener of the show, but you're looking to interact with me in person, make sure you check out my speaking calendar on my website, jeffreycolon.net/speaking. That's GEOFFREYCOLON.net/speaking. April 1st, I'm at Lehigh University talking on the Data X Symposium, and we'll actually be broadcasting an episode from there. Yes, I can record direct to my handset using the iOS app that Spreaker makes. Check it out if you're just getting into podcasting. It actually allows you to be a little bit more creative, which is interesting. Also, the end of April, I'm in Orlando, Florida for Digital Now, and the beginning of May in Hamburg, Germany. So again, you can find all of the dates that I'm speaking at on my website, jeffreycolon.net/speaking.